Hello, welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Mary, and today's video is going to be 10 books that I like more than the majority of people, I guess. I don't really know what I'm going to title this video, but I was going through Goodreads, as I do, and I was looking at books that I've given 5 stars, and then also looking at like the average ratings of those books. And so all of these books have a rating that's either like 3.59 or below that I've given 5 stars. There's one exception that has an extremely low rating on Goodreads, and I give it 4 stars and really enjoyed it. So I'm gonna probably end on that. We'll start with that one actually. So this is the only book that did not get 5 stars for me. It did get 4 stars, and I really enjoyed this book, but it has a 2.97 average rating on Goodreads. And I think that's so interesting. And it's I Am Margaret Moore by Hannah Capin. And this book is kind of like hard to grasp, I guess. The plot line is hard to like get a hold of, so you're not really sure what's going on in the whole book, which might be why people don't like it. I'm not really sure. I haven't looked at a bunch of the negative reviews, but it's set at this girls' camp, and we're following these 3 or 4 girls, and you're from the perspective of Margaret Moore, who is no longer friends with these girls, it seems like, and you're like watching her watch them, and like you're also getting flashbacks to the last summer that they were all there and just trying to piece together this mystery. And I really enjoyed this book, but again, like, I don't know how to explain. It's like kind of difficult because of the perspective that you're in, and she's kind of an unreliable narrator. It's like difficult to figure out what is actually going on, and that could be why people don't like it. But I found this book kind of confusing, but I also like really ended up enjoying it. And so I was surprised seeing that it had such a low average rating. The next books are all books that have gotten low-ish average ratings. I consider anything below like a 3.5 to be pretty low. A lot of these got above a 3.5, but not all of them. But the next one is The Marriage Plot by Jeffrey Eugene Ides, which has a 3.47 average rating on Goodreads, and I gave 5 stars. I loved this book. I don't remember who recommended it to me, but shout out to them because it's fantastic. It might have been my friend Patience, honestly. So it's so good. But it's about these 3 characters primarily. You've got 1 female character and then 2 male characters. And one of the male characters' names is Leonard, and I don't remember the other one. It's Madeline, Leonard, and who is the other guy? Mitchell. That's his name. It took me forever. But you start following them when they're in undergrad at this college, and it's called The Marriage Plot because that's what Madeline is studying in college. She's studying like literature with a specialty in marriage plots, which is like Jane Austen type books. It's like essentially those stories that like are all the conclusion of all those books is a marriage. And that's what she like reads. That's what she studies in school. And she ends up meeting this guy, Leonard, who has like an extreme depressive disorder. And she's also got this friend, Mitchell, and Mitchell likes her as more than a friend. She doesn't like him. So it's about like all of their relationships entangling. It is kind of slow moving and can be frustrating to read at parts, but I just remember loving this book and like really feeling for the characters, really like enjoying the journey of their story together. And like it's kind of a slice of life book, but it does cover a number of years, and I'm wondering if that's like why people don't really like it, or I can imagine people finding the relationship between all 3 of the characters to be like exhausting to read. But for me, I really enjoyed it. So if you like high drama and kind of like a nothing plot but like very character focused, you might like this one. I really enjoyed it. The next one I have to talk about is The Love That Split the World by Emily Henry. I gave this 5 stars. I really liked it. It was really like a 4.5 star, but I read this because my mother-in-law told me to, and she did not like the ending, and I thought the ending was fine. But this has a 3.56 average rating on Goodreads, which I would consider pretty low. It's one of Emily Henry's young adult books that I didn't really realize that she wrote, but it's about this girl who is native, or she's indigenous, and she's living in Kentucky. She was adopted, I think, by a white family, and so she's like never really fit in. And she wants to go get out of Kentucky and go to Brown, maybe some Ivy League college on the East Coast, and that's what she's going to do when she graduates. And so in preparation for this, she's broken up with her boyfriend in this small town because he wants to stay in Kentucky, and she's like, this is just not going to work. His name's Matt. And when the book starts, she started to get these like flashes of an alternate reality almost, if that makes sense. Like she'll see a field where there's a supermarket now, or she'll see there's like a church that in these flashes has like an extended wing that doesn't exist in her world. And she also starts meeting this guy who just starts showing up, and she's never seen him before, doesn't really know anything about him. And like they sort of form this relationship, but they're both trying to figure out like what is going on, because it seems like he is slipping into her dimension and she keeps slipping into his too. So they're trying to figure out like what's going on with that. And It's so good. I loved this book. I thought it was fantastic. I don't really know, again, what people are upset about or what people don't like about. I see a 3-star that says this book is impossible to rate, so take my 3-star rating lightly. I've seen some 4s, some 3s, there's a 2. This person says that they felt bored and indifferent, and also frustrated while reading. And then they had mixed feelings at the end, which I've heard from a lot of people. Well, I've heard from my mother-in-law, and that seems to be like the consensus. Again, I enjoyed the ending. I thought this is one of those books that, like, it was hard. It was going to be hard because of all the things that get revealed to have a very satisfying ending. And it did not end the way that I thought it would. So I thought something else was going to happen that did not happen. And I think I would have liked that better, but also maybe I wouldn't have. I don't know. The other ending that I was thinking of would have, like, fundamentally altered what the book's ultimate ending was. I don't know how else to say it than that. But I loved that book, but it clearly is not very popular. What Should Be Wild by Julia Fine is another one I want to talk about. But this is a darker fantasy. It's got like very fairy tale feelings to it. I've talked about this one before on books that I loved that other people don't really seem to like. I read this years ago, 2020 maybe, but I really loved it. It has a 3.21 rating. I own it. Should I get it out? Hold on. Here it is. Sorry, I went and got it. But What Should Be Wild by Julia Fine is like a dark fantasy or a dark fairy tale type story. And it's about this girl who comes from a long line of cursed women, and it's kind of told in multiple timelines. So every other chapter is one of the cursed women of her past going back to like 880, like way long time ago. And you're just getting all of these women's stories but that like those chapters are like what's being told to the main character. So like you're getting told her lore as she's getting told her lore. But essentially she has this ability where if she touches something that was once living, it dies. And if she touches something that is dead, it comes back to life. So she has to be really careful about like what she touches. She really can't touch anybody. Her mom died giving birth to her because she touched her mom when she was being born, I guess. And at that time, they didn't know that she could bring things back to life. So they just buried her mom, I guess. And she's just like, she really, like if she touches wood, I don't know. It's like really confusing and like kind of hard to grasp, but you sort of have to just like suspend your disbelief a little bit with that. And then she ends up meeting, there's a dog that she can touch and it doesn't die. And she ends up meeting this boy because she's always been told she can't go to the woods. I'm kind of fumbling this explanation. She's always been told she can't go to the woods. She's never been to school. She's been raised by her dad who doesn't touch her. Like there's no physical contact. And her dad one day ends up going to the woods. I don't remember why, but if you read it, you would know. And she needs to go find him. So she contacts this boy who is like, I think the grandson of the woman who used to take care of her, but the woman died. So the boy has been coming to her house, the grandmother's house. And she finds him on the road, is like, listen, she basically tells him what's going on. And is like, I need you to help me find my dad. And then they get together and like try to find her dad. And a lot of like dark and twisty things happen. I don't really know why people don't like this book, but I can tell you. One of the reviews says that they wish that there ends up being 2 like male protagonists who come to help the main character, and she says that she wishes that it had been more about the main character helping herself, which totally fine. And then this other person said they felt like the book never got to the point. Again, I really liked this book, but obviously take my review for a grain of salt because so many people seem to feel indifferent about it or dislike it. So I just thought that was interesting, but this is like one of my favorite books that I read the first year that I was on BookTube. So the next book I'm going to talk about, I will try to be brief because I have talked about it kind of a lot recently, and that is The Sisters of the Winter Wood by Rena Rossnor. So this has a 3.52 average rating on Goodreads. I gave it 5 stars. This is the theme of this video. This is based on Jewish mythology, and it's like historical fantasy set in the turn of the 20th century in Eastern Europe. And we're following this family that is a Jewish family, but the mom was a Gentile and she converted to Judaism. So the family's kind of like on the outside of the Jews, but also like they're not Christians or not pagan or whatever the other like religious options are. And so they don't really fit in anywhere. And as the story progresses, you find out the parents have to leave because there's a family emergency back with the dad's family. But before they leave, they tell their daughters, they have 2 daughters, they tell them that the mom is descended from swans. And so she turns into a swan, and the dad is descended from bears. And so he turns into a bear. And the daughters each have their own, like one of the daughters turns into a bear, the other daughter turns into a swan. And they're basically tasked with protecting each other while their parents are gone. And also they're each told different parts of their lore. So they're protecting each other, but they don't know the whole picture neither of them does. So they don't know that the other one has also been told to like protect them from certain things. And there are other people in the village who can like turn into different creatures, as it turns out. And it's just about them like finding their way in the world. It's a lot about like puberty, and because they're going through puberty, which is why they're experiencing these changes for the first time. And it's just about like becoming your own person apart from your parents' identities and apart from like your familial identity, if that makes sense. There's a little bit of like a love subplot. There's also like a little bit of a like troublemaker subplot going on. And I love this book. I thought it was fantastic. It is a standalone fantasy, which is something that I love. And I wish that other people liked it as much as I did. So let's see why people didn't like this one, shall we? So this person said that they didn't like the romantic subplot, which was one of my favorite parts of it. So it is a larger part. It's a lot of one of the characters' whole story arcs is related to this romantic subplot. So that could be why they didn't like it. That's so funny. This person also said that they didn't feel like it was what it was promised, which was dark historical fantasy. It was more of a YA fantasy romance. That's so funny that so many people thought that, which again is why I liked it. So maybe if you don't like a strong romantic subplot, maybe it's not as slight as I thought, don't read this one. But I really enjoyed it. I don't know. The next book that I'm going to talk about was my favorite book 2 years ago. Was one of my favorite books. I don't think it was actually my favorite book. But I believe 24 was the year that I read this. No, 2022. I meant 2023 when I said 2024, but it was actually 2022, which kind of surprises me. But I guess not really, because I was living in Arkansas when I read this. So that does make sense. But this book is Love and Other Thought Experiments by Sophie Ward, and it has an average of 3.59, which is on the higher end of the low average ratings, I think. And this book is a collection of short stories that all intertwine. So it spans a large amount of time, but you're following characters that know each other, and it like weaves in and out. It does get to the future and a little like sci-fi-y, which could be why some people don't like it. Also, I will tell you, I think this short story description will let you know if this is going to be something for you or not. There is a short story, the first short story is about this lesbian couple who's trying to decide if they want to have a baby, and one of the women in this couple like can't focus on that decision because she has convinced herself that an ant crawled into her eye while she was asleep and is living in her brain. And then later there's a short story that is the perspective of the ant in her brain. Okay, so if that's sounds like something that is intriguing to you, you might like this. If that sounds too kooky, off the wall, you won't like it. But I loved this book. This is the book that like really introduced me to the concept of a bunch of short stories, like short vignettes that all interconnect like this, where you're getting different perspectives in each story, but together it tells a whole narrative. And another book that's like this that I mention a lot is How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. That is about a pandemic and like the end of the world kind of, but it's about like everybody else's, like a bunch of different perspectives on that. This is more about like one family and their journey in the world, if that makes sense, throughout time. And that's another thing that I really like. I like a family story that extends a long period of time. So this book, again, really worked for me, but I do understand why it would not be for everybody. So that's why I get that caveat of like, these are two of the stories in it. Is that something that you want to read? If not, don't read it. The next book, this book doesn't really surprise me that it has a low average rating because I could kind of see this going either way. But the average rating is 3.57, and the book is Comfort Me with Apples by Catherine M. Valente. This is another book that I gave 5 stars. It was the first book that I read in 2021. Is that right? Or 2022? 2022 is the first book that I finished. And it's extremely short. It's like 100 pages. It's a horror novella. And I can't really say too much about this because it's so short and I don't want to like spoil what happens, but it's essentially about this woman who has this like perfect husband, and she's just describing it, and you're reading it and you're like, that sounds bad actually. And it just goes on and on from there. I've seen a lot of people say that they did not think that this was as like unique of a story, or like they thought it was very predictable. I felt that way after a certain reveal happened. Like there's one reveal that after it happens, you're like, oh, I know what's going on. But it did take me most of the, like, I did not figure it out before the reader was supposed to figure it out, like before the reveal occurred. And I think that's why a lot of people disliked this book, is because I think they were smarter than me and figured it out faster. But I really enjoyed this book. It was very like whimsical in the horror aspects. I don't even know, I guess it is horror. I'm not going to comment on what is and is not horror. I did not find it scary, but it is like unsettling, if that makes sense. So the next one that I'm going to talk about is one of my favorite books from this past year. And I'm also going to be kind of brief with this one because I feel like I've talked about it a lot recently, but it's Just Like Home by Sarah Gailey. This has an average rating of 3.33, which really surprises me. I gave this 5 stars. Obviously, I loved it. So it's a woman, Vera. And Vera has to go back to her family home because her mother is dying. She grew up in this house that is haunted, basically. And she's having to go back for the first time in years. And her mother is horrible to her. They have a terrible relationship. She hasn't been back, I think, since her dad died. And so they left the house at one point, and then her mother moved back into the house. Something like that, where like she hasn't been back since she was a teenager, basically. And she does not really speak to her mom, but her mom gives her a call and is like, hey, I'm dying. I need you to come take care of me, and then I need you to take care of the house. And so she's like really not looking forward to doing this. And there's also like all these rumors around her house and her family in this town that you learn more about as it goes on. But this was one of those books that has like a haunted house. It's a haunted house book, but like the house is its own character. And that's something that I really enjoy in horror and fantasy, like gothics. That's like one of the gothic. I don't think this is fully gothic, but it does have that aspect where like the house feels like it's alive. And I really, really enjoyed this book. I thought it was so good. I liked the exploration also between the mother and daughter relationship. And I liked the like daughter forced to come home and like reckon with her past. I liked all of those things. And ultimately I loved this book. I do remember, I think when people didn't like this one, I think people thought it was boring. Let's see. Someone said it was so slow. Someone else said that they picked it up because of the cover and the blurb, which I totally get. The cover is gorgeous, I think. But they said that they found it very boring and hard to read at some points, and they got easily distracted because there was nothing to keep you focused or gripped on the story at all. Again, I disagree. I do think this has a slower pace, and it is very character driven. So if you're looking for more of a plot driven book, maybe this wouldn't be for you, but I really enjoyed this one. The next book that I have to talk about is totally different than that last one, but it's One Italian Summer by Rebecca Surley. And this one I was really hesitant to go into because I wasn't sure I was going to feel about it because it is tagged as romance on Goodreads. And the blurb says that a woman, her mother dies, and she and her mom are supposed to go to Positano, and she's engaged to someone else, but she decides that she's going to go to Positano by herself. And she ends up like meeting her mother when her mother was young in Positano, okay? And it says that it's a romance, so I was really worried about how the romance was gonna go because I personally don't love cheating even in books. Like, it's just something that like I feel like I can't root for the couple because I'm like, I don't know, something about, I just like, it doesn't feel good, and when I want a romance, I want something that feels good. Do you know what I mean? So I was really nervous about this one, but I ended up being very pleasantly surprised. But it is about her like reckoning with her relationship with her mom, and also like the expectations she has for her own life based on the life that her mom lived. And it's really good. It's very sad because obviously her mom died at the beginning of the book, and it brings up a lot of like the past with their relationship and her parents' relationship and her like childhood that she didn't really know about. But this one is so good. But it does, I don't know if I said, it has an average rating of 3.59 on Goodreads, which again is at the higher end of this thing. But this book like really, I don't know, it made me reflect a lot on my like own life, and also the kind of pedestal that we put our parents on, and the idea that like parents are just people who happen to have children. And I don't know, as I get older, that becomes like more and more clear to me because I like have friends with kids, and it's crazy to me that you're allowed to be someone's parent because I feel like, I don't know, it's interesting like seeing my sister has 3 kids, and like you either know or you don't know, but like it's crazy to think that that's how my parents were at one point. Whereas like when I was a kid, they were like mom and dad, you know, like the big boss. I don't know. So I love that book, and it really did like make me feel very emotional. I would say it's not even chick lit. It's more like general fiction beach ready, but it is more emotional than like, so I guess maybe it is more chick lit because isn't that kind of the chick lit thing that it's like makes you like laugh and makes you cry, that kind of thing. That's kind of how it was. It like you run the emotional gambit reading that book, but it ultimately is like a very bittersweet read. And the last book that I have to talk about is another book that I absolutely love, but I understand that a lot of people didn't really care for, and that is Silver Nitrate by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. I loved this book. It's another horror book. Is that what it is? Yeah. It's like historical fiction. It's set in the 90s in Mexico City, and we're following this woman who, her name's Montserrat. She works in the film industry. I don't remember exactly what she does, but then her best friend is this guy, Tristan, and Tristan is a former telenovela star who got into a really horrific accident and has scarring all over his body now, so he's no longer like the teen heartthrob. He does mostly like voiceover work, and he's kind of struggling, she's kind of struggling, but they both have this like love of old horror movies, and they end up meeting this guy who I think moves into Tristan's building or Montserrat's building, one of their apartment buildings. This guy moves in, and he is like a director of cult classic horror films from like the 60s, I think. And so Montserrat immediately is like obsessed with him and wants to like, they get dinner and she wants to like know all about it. And then this book sort of goes from there. And he's got this one film that like, I think is either a lost film or something like that. And so Montserrat and Tristan are like working together to like help him restore this film, and then all this stuff starts happening. I don't know how much of it is a spoiler to say, so I don't really want to go into it. So it does say they're trying to help him shoot the missing scene in his film so he can put this film up, but then dark, twisted things happen, and it seems like somebody or something wants this film to never get made. And it's so good. I really enjoyed this book. I really liked the like vibe of it. It's interesting because I don't know that movies is something that I like that much in books. It depends on how it's done. I don't like a lot of movies being referenced in books, like real movies, because either A, they spoil the movie and I haven't seen it. I'm looking at you, Stephen Graham Jones. Or it's like, just like, it feels pretentious, if that makes sense. Like right now, I'm reading, spoiler for my wrap up, I guess, for February, but I'm reading a Riley Sager book. The one about the girl in the car, Survive the Night. And she's obsessed with movies, and I don't, like, I'm having a hard time getting into that one. We'll see how it goes. I might end up really enjoying it. I'm not very far in right now. I'm, like, less than 100 pages into it, but I'm just saying. So I was pleasantly surprised by this one, and I really, really, really enjoyed it. Like, I love this book, and I just remember being, like, gagged and, like, really wanting to know what was happening next. And so it's so funny to me that some people didn't really care for it. This person said they think she's a very talented author and they always admire her attention to research that adds up to the context of her stories. But this person basically just says none of her books ever live up to Mexican Gothic, which I have not read yet. And then they said they wish they loved this book, but it didn't do it for them. I don't really know. That wasn't very specific. This person said that they hated that it had a romantic subplot. That's very funny to me. This person said the main thing that irked them was that it's pretty much a huge slow burn before anything good happens. So basically, they didn't like the pacing, which totally fair. It is a slower paced book. That's fine. That seems to be something that doesn't necessarily bother me. I've seen that complaint with some of Ruth Ware's books, that they are slower, but I like it because it's like almost a slow build, and then suddenly you hit the top of the mountain, if you will, and it just snowballs down from there. And I find that very satisfying as far as pacing goes. But I do understand that we all have different tastes. So I just wanted to share those. That's it. Those are 10 books that I liked more than the average reader on Goodreads. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these books, how you felt about them. Also, let me know what books you really like that seem to have like an overall negative perception, or that people seem to not like or have a lot of mixed reviews. Like, I just think this is so interesting because I mean, there's a reader for every book. There are so many books that I don't really care for that people love, and I think that's great. But I just wanted to highlight some of these books that I love that it seems like not a lot of people really care for, mostly because I'm like, if I'm describing it and it sounds like something you'd like, I'm trying to give you the negatives with the positives, or what other people perceive as the negatives. That way you can like pick books that you will enjoy. And if you do pick any of these up off my recommendation, let me know how that goes for you. You have been warned that most people don't seem to like them as much as I do, but that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. You can also subscribe to my channel because I do post 2 videos every week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!